Motion number 3 on transport. I call the Minister to move the motion.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that the Renewable Transport Fuel Obligations Sustainable Aviation Fuel Order 2024, which was laid before this House on the 24th of July, be approved. In doing this, Madam Deputy Speaker, I just want to take a moment to pay tribute to my former constituent, Ken Easton, who died recently at the age of 96. He served the people of Blakely and Broughton in this House from 1979 to 1997. He knew me as a child. He was delighted that I became the Member of Parliament. He worked diligently on behalf of his constituents. I will remember him, his late wife Doris, who I've kept in contact with, and his current family in my prayers tonight. As a fuel which can be used in existing aircraft, sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF, is one of the most effective ways to start to decarbonise flights. The associated greenhouse gas emissions from using SAF are up to 70% less than fossil jet fuel on a life cycle basis. This government recognises the urgency of the global climate challenge and the opportunities that are available from leading on the development of these technologies. It is a core part of our mission to make the UK a clean energy superpower, and is one of the many steps we are taking to decarbonise aviation, which also includes our plans for airspace modernisation. The SAF mandate will support the decarbonisation of the aviation industry by creating demand for SAF in the UK. The scheme has been developed over several years, including 2 formal consultations and significant stakeholder consultation. In July this year, we confirmed the detail of the proposed SAF mandate set out in this statutory instrument. This was received positively by stakeholders. The SAF mandate is one of several government initiatives to support the development, production and use of SAF in the UK. The Advanced Fuel Funds, or AFF, for example, is currently supporting 13 UK plants with £135 million of grant funding. Additionally, the government is introducing a revenue support certainty mechanism bill, which was in our King's speech, which will support SAF producers who are looking to invest in new plants in the UK. It will incentivise investments in UK SAF production, helping to drive growth across the UK, secure the supply of British-made SAF, and maintain the UK's position as a global leader. Alongside the potential for SAF to reduce carbon emissions on a life cycle basis compared to traditional jet fuel, there are significant economic benefits associated with the development of a domestic SAF industry. Industry research estimates that such development could generate up to 60,000 new jobs by 2050, adding up to £10 billion gross value add per annum. This supports our growth mission to kickstart economic growth across the UK. The introduction of a SAF mandate marks an important step forward for the decarbonisation of the aviation sector. It will provide a long-term incentive for SAF use in the UK through setting a guaranteed level of demand, demonstrating the UK's world-leading commitment to SAF uptake. It will also provide clarity for investors as a clear signal to develop SAF production facilities and more advanced SAF technologies in the UK and globally. Crucially, the mandate could reduce aviation emissions by up to 2.7 megatons of CO2 equivalent in 2030 and up to 6.3 megatons of CO2 equivalent in 2040. Decarbonising transport is a key focus for this government. It is central to the delivery of the UK's cross-economy climate targets and directly supports the Prime Minister's mission to accelerate our journey to net zero. Delivering greener transport is also one of the 5 priorities my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Transport, has set out for the Department of Transport. This SI will deliver on our manifesto pledge to secure the UK aviation industry's long-term future through promoting sustainable aviation fuels. The statutory instrument will impose an annual sustainable aviation fuel obligation on every company that, in a specified period, supplies jet fuel over a certain threshold. It will operate a tradable certificate scheme where the supply of SAF is rewarded in proportion to its greenhouse gas emissions reduction. To be eligible for certificates, the supplied SAF must meet strict sustainability criteria, including that it must be a residual waste or residue-derived biofuel, recycled carbon fuel, low-carbon hydrogen or power-to-liquid fuel. These certificates can be used to discharge a supplier's obligation or to be sold to other suppliers. If this statutory instrument is approved, the SAF mandate will take effect on the 1st of January 2025. The SAF mandate will require 2% of jet fuel to be made from sustainable sources in 2025, 10% in 2030 and 22% in 2040. It is one of the world's most ambitious frameworks to drive demand for SAF. A successful and resilient SAF industry will need a range of technologies and feedstocks to meet increasing demand. The SAF mandate drives this diversity of technology and feedstocks in two main ways. Firstly, we will create space for more advanced fuels. We will do this by setting a future cap on fuels that will be limited by feedstock supply. These fuels and those derived from segregated oils and fats, known as hydroprocessed esters and fatty acids, we recognise that particularly in the early stages of the mandate, HEFA will make an important contribution to meeting the SAF mandate. HEFA can contribute 100% of SAF demand required under the mandate in 2025 and 2026. The cap then gradually tightens, decreasing to 71% in 2030 and 35% in 2040. The mandate will still allow around 1 million tonnes of HEFA-derived SAF to be supplied in the UK each year from 2035. Secondly, to accelerate the development of advanced fuels, a specific obligation on suppliers to supply power-to-liquid fuels will be introduced. Power-to-liquid fuels have a lower risk of feedstock competition and other negative environmental impacts. From 2028, the power-to-liquid obligation will be set at 0.2% of total jet fuel demand, increasing to 3.5% in 2040. Fuel suppliers will be able to meet their SAF mandate obligation in three ways. They can supply SAF and earn certificates, buy certificates from others who have supplied fuel, or pay a buyout price. This buyout mechanism will apply both to the main obligation and the power-to-liquid obligation, which will operate as a method of compliance if there is insufficient SAF supply in the market. This SI sets out the buyout prices. They represent a significant incentive to supply SAF into the UK market. They are set at a level to encourage the supply of SAF over the use of the buyout and sets a maximum cost for the scheme, thereby delivering a greenhouse gas emissions reduction at an acceptable cost. As mentioned, for fuel to be eligible for certificates, it must align with strict sustainability criteria. It must be made from sustainable wastes or residues. SAF produced from food, feed or energy crops will not be allowed. Suppliers must therefore report information to the mandate administrator, demonstrating compliance with the sustainability criteria for each application. The mandate administrator will have the power to not issue certificates if sufficient evidence is not provided. They will also have the power to revoke certificates if inaccurate or fraudulent information is provided, and issue civil penalties to suppliers for lack of compliance. The information fuel suppliers provide must be independently verified before suppliers can apply for SAF certificates. To ensure the design of the SAF mandate reflects the latest technological and commercial developments of SAF, there will be continuous monitoring of trends and formal reviews conducted and published at every 5 years, with the first review carried out by 2030. To support fuel suppliers, the administration of the SAF mandate is closely aligned with the administration of the Renewable Transport Fuels obligation, which currently obligates fuel suppliers of road fuels in a very similar way. The government recognises that sectors like aviation are vital for achieving economic growth, shaping the future of clean energy and delivering for our communities. The development of the SAF mandate, alongside other priorities like modernising our airspace, is a key part of this government's ambitious and pragmatic approach to decarbonising transport and promoting economic growth, ensuring that the UK continues to lead the way globally on SAF. I commend this order to the House.
Yeah. The question is, as on the order paper. Shadow Minister Greg Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And in responding to this debate on the Renewable Transport Fuel Obligations Sustainable Aviation Fuel Order 2024, can I say from the very outset that the transition to sustainable fuel is a topic that has had my interest for many years. Some may even say I am very capable of becoming a complete bore on the subject, but I will not push the limits too far this evening. The Honourable Gentleman from Easington knows that all too well. Indeed, we both served on the Transport Select Committee during the last Parliament, where our Fuelling the Future report championed sustainable and synthetic fuel. And as well, I've put it into practice, but in my case on the road rather than in the air in a classic Land Rover powered by synthetic fuel for my past 2 summer surgeries tours, for which I draw the House's attention to my entry in the Register of Interests. But there is a clear and undeniable role for these fuels in our path to 2050 across all transport modes. Aviation is possibly the most difficult to defossilise and decarbonise, but they are also ahead of the curve. Sustainable and wholly synthetic fuels are an innovation that enable everyone to continue doing what they want to do, be that flying on holiday to see family or on a business trip to general motoring, in a different, cleaner, eventually defossilised, carbon-neutral way. Not reinventing the wheel, but reinventing the fuel. Yeah. With the SI in front of us today, I can assure the House, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the opposition are not looking to oppose or divide on this. Quite the opposite, as this statutory instrument is a continuation of plans set out by the previous government. Sustainable aviation fuel was one of 6 key measures in the last government's Jet Zero strategy, supporting the growth of sustainable aviation fuel in our United Kingdom. The cost-benefit analysis produced by the Department of Transport before the general election suggested that the SAF industry could add over £1.8 billion to the economy and create over 10,000 jobs in the country. The gradual transition to SAF is the correct way to go, requiring 2% of UK jet fuel to be made from sustainable sources in 2025, 10% by 2030 and 22% in 2040. That being incentivised through the award of tradable certificates with a cash value. That said, and it's rare that I make this comparison, Madam Deputy Speaker, that said, the UK target of 2040 falls short of that set in the European Union of 34%. The Conservative government recognised that SAF may be more expensive than traditional jet fuel in the intermediate term. And our plan included a review mechanism to help manage prices and minimise the impact on ticket fares for passengers. So my first question to the Minister is, can the government reassure the House that the impact on passengers will also be kept to a minimum to ensure that they are not footing the bill? Providing that sufficient SAF is available, any increases in airfares as a result of SAF will fall well within the range of usual fluctuations in prices we see every year, and the previous government had plans in place to prevent any major hikes. So can the government confirm that they too will guarantee that there will be no major hikes in prices so that we can transition to net zero in an affordable way, taking people along with us? The Conservatives also kick-started the UK SAF industry by allocating £135 million through our Advanced Fuels Fund, which was funding 13 projects to reach completion and supporting our ambition to see 5 plants under construction by 2025. So can the Minister provide an update on these projects, as they will be vital in helping us move towards using sustainable fuel? Where I would urge the Minister to focus future thoughts, however, is in the field of how to ensure the UK is a power hub for e-SAF, which I clarify as 100% synthetic aviation fuel, and to gently kick the tyres on whether we are progressing the technology as quickly as is humanly, financially and scientifically possible. We have significant players in this space in the United Kingdom, like Zero Petroleum, who sit on the Jet Zero Council and indeed hold the Guinness World Records title of first aircraft powered by synthetic fuel in 2021. I visited their plant over the summer, where they are producing engineering levels of synthetic fuels, including aviation fuel, to hear about their progress and better understand the obstacles in their way. It is essential these innovators are empowered to grow, develop their fuels and provide both green solutions to aviation fuel and value to our economy going forwards. With power-to-liquid SAF getting a sub-mandate starting in 2028, reaching 0.5% of SAF by 2030 and increasing to 3.5% by 2040, this is again slower and less ambitious than the European Union's 10% figure by 2040. Some experts have said that this suggests the UK has a more cautious approach for power-to-liquid and that the United Kingdom's strategy focuses on monitoring progress under the mandate, with the potential to revise these targets depending on technological advances. So where the SAF mandate and the SI before us today could go further in its future iterations, Madam Deputy Speaker, is very clear. According to the explanatory memorandum document, if subsidised hydrogen is used to make eSAF under the Hydrogen Production Business Model, HPBM, support scheme, you can't claim SAF certificates against the mandate. Without HPBM support, there is the risk that the cost of green hydrogen will be far too high for eSAF to be produced at a competitive price in the United Kingdom. Indeed, there is even the risk that the eSAF production cost will be above the eSAF mandate buyout price. If the cost is above the buyout price, this will mean that no UK eSAF plants will get built, and therefore all of the UK's eSAF demand will be fulfilled by foreign producers. The HPBM is needed to bring down the cost below the buyout price under the SAF mandate. Both support under the HPBM and the revenue certainty mechanism are needed for UK eSAF projects to be bankable. For example, credit or potentially subsidy stacking needs to be explicitly allowed. The SI before us is clearly supportive of the power-to-liquid pathway. However, building on this, it would be prudent for government to express an intent to financially support domestic eSAF technology developers such as Zero Petroleum or OXCCU, as opposed to project integrators, in order to give a boost to this much-needed industry in the United Kingdom, as well as helping the country to benefit from the vast export potential of this technology. This could be via a dedicated power-to-liquid technology grants, such as fuel synthesis, direct air capture specifically for fuel, and or potentially equity funding, for example, via the UK Infrastructure Bank. There is one further anomaly that the ATI, the Aviation Technology Institute, which is UK government funded, is not permitted to deploy funds to power-to-liquid technologies. And I put it to the Minister that that should be corrected. Madam Deputy Speaker, we can be a powerhouse in the United Kingdom for SAF. The new government is right to continue with the path set by the previous Conservative government, and so we support the motion today. But the potential for the future is huge. And in the spirit of getting this right, I urge the Minister to consider the points I've outlined and supercharge our great country's role in this technology.
Before I do call the next speaker, can I just remind members that it's really helpful for the chair, not least me personally, but there will be other deputy speakers later, if you bob up and down, even if I've got your name on a list, it's really helpful if you indicate that you wish to speak. So, Grahame.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm not going to detain the House too long. Hooray! I just want to make a couple of points, if I may. And as the honourable gentleman, the member for Buckinghamshire indicated, serving as we did on the Transport Select Committee in the last Parliament, the committee did do quite a detailed inquiry on the sustainability of fuels in all sectors. It made several recommendations, and I don't believe that there is a cigarette paper, if that's a non-PC term, between the two sides of the House. But there's a couple of questions I want to ask. I mean, this subject is really complicated and it's plagued with anagrams. HEFA, SAF, ATF, ESAF, HPBM, Jet Zero. I'm not going to be tempted into aviation puns, but there are some important stats as well. And as has been suggested by, or stated by my honourable friend on the front bench, estimates are suggesting that the sustainable aviation fuel industry could create up to 60,000 jobs. I know the Shadow Minister said perhaps 10,000 new jobs. I think this is a longer time frame, by 2050. And it was suggested by the Shadow Minister could contribute as much as $1 billion. But by 2050, it could contribute as much as 10 billion to the UK's economy. So it's clearly a very important sector. And the thing that I'm concerned about, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that we ensure that sustainable aviation fuels under this mandate that are required to meet the strictest sustainability standards, that we ensure that they are, yes, green fuels, and that there is a staged response. We've heard what that is towards Jet Zero, 2% from 2025, 10% by 2030 and 22% by 2040. But we really must ensure that these greener fuels are responsibly sourced from the most sustainable UK locations, preferably in the United Kingdom. We had a debate last week, I believe it was, about the launch of GB Energy and the importance of not exporting the jobs that are created through our own efforts to decarbonisation. So I'd also like to ask the Minister, will GB Energy be playing a role in ensuring that some of the new technologies, and it's possible we may well develop a hydrogen fuel cell that can produce a green hydrogen much more cheaply. But in the meantime, to plug this gap, that efforts are being made to ensure that we onshore as many as possible of the jobs and benefits of this exciting opportunity. Thank you.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Wera Hobhouse.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I sense there is a great deal of consensus across the House about this statutory instrument. There is consensus that the aviation industry is the most, or the aviation sector is one of the most hardest to decarbonise, and there's probably also consensus that this new technology that is being proposed, SAF, sustainable aircraft fuels, and its different iterations, needs a great deal of technological knowledge. But I think by making these first steps to creating that SAF mandate from the 1st of January at 2% of total jet fuel demand and increase it on a linear basis to 10% by 2030 and then 22% in 2040. The principle of this has no opposition, and we will absolutely support the government in that effort. Madam Deputy Speaker, Virgin Atlantic has already demonstrated that a plane can fly across the Atlantic on 100% SAFs, but of course that was one flight, and there are hundreds of flights every day. So that is the challenge. I congratulate Virgin Atlantic for this groundbreaking achievement, but we really need to see with industry and with the government and with indeed with everybody who is developing new technologies, how can we produce that aircraft fuel and sustainable aircraft fuels at the scale that it is needed. And it indeed needs a great deal of investment. We know that biofuels are not the long-term solutions as they compete with food productions. SAF from waste, the next generation of SAF is also not a long-term solution. It's obviously part of the solution, but, and the Shadow Minister has pointed this out, the real challenge is to get to the third generation SAFs, and that is synthetic fuels. And we need to develop them as soon as possible. And they need a great deal of electricity. Whatever we say about this, direct air capture needs a great deal of electricity. Producing hydrogen in a sustainable way, i.e. getting to green hydrogen, will also need a great deal of electricity. So really, the crunch of all of this is where is all that renewable energy coming from, unless we are ultimately overproducing renewable energy. And I do believe GB Energy probably will have a big say in this and will be crucial in developing all that renewable energy that will ultimately help us to decarbonize the aviation sector. This is really the challenge. While I welcome the kickstart of a journey to net zero in aviation, the 10% to 20% mandate between 2030 and 2040 is a concern for the Liberal Democrats as well. We want to get to net zero by 2045. Having planes running on still 78% of fossil fuels is just not good enough. The UK has the third largest aviation network in the world and the second largest aerospace manufacturing sector. Almost 1 million UK jobs are directly or indirectly supported by the aviation sector. The future of the aviation industry with SAF is obviously a wonderful opportunity and a challenge. Making the right choices in SAF will ensure the UK can continue to be a global leader. And again, I think across the House, we are at one to wanting this to happen and make the UK the global leader in this. It is only right that we take these steps which supports decarbonisation and also creating the jobs that we need in the future. What is important is that this government collaborates with the aviation fuel suppliers to ensure this initiative really succeeds. And I would really like to hear from the Minister a little bit more in detail of how they will work alongside suppliers of how we can make this a long-term success. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, as I've already said, we welcome this, but there are also other examples that we can do in the meantime to get to decarbonising the sector. For example, banning short-term domestic flights on journeys which were by going by rail is taking less than 2.5 hours. Such a ban already exists in France, and it would be good if the government would at least look at this. The cost of flying must be linked to the environmental cost. It is ridiculous that I can, at least on some journeys, fly 100 miles to any European city at a lower cost than what it costs me to go by train from Bath to London. We Liberal Democrats would focus on those who fly the most to reduce the unfair burden on those households who only fly once or twice a year. Plus, we would impose a new super tax on private jet flights and remove VAT exemptions for private first and business class flights. To conclude, while we welcome today's introduction at the SAF's mandate on the 1st of January, I urge the government to review the targets set from 2030 to 2040 and be more ambitious than what is today proposed, so that by 2040 a much higher percentage of aviation fuel is coming from sustainable aircraft fuel than the 22% that is currently proposed. Thank you.
Maiden speech, Steve Race.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I take this opportunity to put on record my congratulations to you on your election and to pay tribute to the staff of the entire House who've worked so hard to make us all comfortable and able to get on with our jobs in this very complicated and complex place. I pay tribute to the maiden speeches we heard in previous debates today, including the members from Makerfield and Macclesfield on this side of the House and from Witney on the Liberal Democrat benches. Given his reference to the wool trade is entirely possible, given Exeter's wealth in the Middle Ages was built on the wool trade, bringing it down from Dartmoor, that our two places had significant trading links in the past. I'm delighted to give this maiden speech as the new member for Exeter, only the third in over half a century. The Honourable Member for Lincoln, in his own maiden speech, who was here earlier on today, stated that Lincoln is the oldest parliamentary seat in the constituency, established in 1265. Exeter, another great cathedral and university city, by comparison is a mere whippersnapper. Our seat was established in 1295. Madam Deputy Speaker, of the many members who've represented Exeter in the subsequent 7 centuries, my immediate predecessor, Sir Ben Bradshaw, needs little introduction. He served the country diligently throughout his 27 years as a member, including a decade as a minister. Elected in the 1997 Labour landslide, he gained early notice as one of the first out gay men ever to be elected to the Commons. After a notorious campaign, Exonians, in their wisdom, rightly and roundly rejected the outrageous homophobia of his opponent. And I and many others in here today are the many proud successors of his trailblazing role. Ben loved our city, and the city took him to its heart. He was re-elected 6 further times, and even this July, despite no longer being the candidate, he was as active knocking on doors as he has ever been and as popular as ever. Madam Deputy Speaker, I might be having a particularly difficult conversation on the doorstep, but the face of even the most hardened and sceptical voter would light up as Ben marched past, in his canvassing uniform of cargo shorts and check shirt, and usually whistling the theme tune from The Great Escape. Hugs were exchanged, selfies taken, and heartfelt thanks expressed. He is almost universally accepted within Exeter to have done them proud. He has certainly been a friend and mentor to me over nearly 2 decades, and I thank him for that. Ben took particular pride in the turnaround in Exeter's education under his watch, to which as MP he made a huge contribution. By 2010, not only had every single state secondary school in Exeter been rebuilt, but a new leadership culture had been established where low attainment became unacceptable for our young people in every single part of the city. From having some of the worst state secondary schools in the country, Exeter's secondary schools became some of the most improved, to which the most recent exceptional GCSE results bear testimony. Exeter can now also boast one of the best further education colleges in the country, again as our recent A-level and T-level results show. A vital, but in much of Britain badly neglected element in providing wider opportunity for young people, including for those who choose alternative routes into work. As a school governor at Willowbrook Primary School in Exeter, serving one of our most economically deprived neighbourhoods, I also pay tribute from first-hand experience to the primary school teachers everywhere who go above and beyond to give their young children the very best start in life. This turnaround in Exeter's education system didn't happen by accident. It took hard work, strong leadership and a collaborative culture. I'd like to thank some of our leaders for everything they've done to give our young people better life chances in Exeter. That includes Moira Marder at the Ted Ragg Trust, John Laramie at Exeter College and Molly Marler at Willowbrook Primary School. And of course I want to pay tribute to the politicians like former Devon County Councillor Saxon Spence and the then Schools Minister Lord Adonis, who had the vision and the ability to deliver for Exeter. Madam Deputy Speaker, Exeter's standing and learning goes beyond our school system. Next year, the University of Exeter celebrates its 70th anniversary of its Royal Charter. In that time, it has grown to be an outstanding institution, now with well over 30,000 students. But it builds on a tradition of an unbroken history of learning and academia stretching back at least to the 10th century. In Exeter Cathedral rests the Exeter Book, an exquisite anthology of Anglo-Saxon poetry and riddles that is still the largest known collection of Old English literature and is recognised by UNESCO as one of the world's principal cultural artefacts, making Exeter UNESCO City of Literature. Today, Madam Deputy Speaker, of the world's top 21 climate scientists, 5 are UK-based, and all of them work for our globally renowned University of Exeter and the Met Office. Along with these two institutions and a growing ecosystem of businesses, Exeter is home to a large and ever-growing research and innovation base that is at the forefront of combating and mitigating the effects of climate change. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's become fashion in some circles today to denigrate our universities. I refute this entirely. They stand as beacons of intellectual excellence, the future success of our knowledge economy, and the hope of wider educational opportunity for many people. Madam Deputy Speaker, a good education is what helped me get to this chamber today. I grew up in a council house with my mum, who spent her entire childhood in care, and I was the first in my family ever to go to university. And so I pledged to work with all of our education leaders to make sure that every young person in Exeter has the best education to help them to reach their own potential. And I want this Labour government to deliver an equivalent leap forward in educational opportunity that its predecessors achieved for their time in 1945, 64 and 97. In relation to this debate, Exeter University is home to the Centre for Clean Mobility, a partnership with business to develop low-emissions power systems for aerospace and automotive sectors. Our university is also world-leading in genomics research. One of the main reasons I'm in politics as a Labour MP is down to my sister. She was born when I was 10, and when she was a year old, she was diagnosed with Hurler syndrome, a rare genetic condition with no cure. Given a life expectancy of around 5 years, she finally died 2 days short of her 10th birthday. Much of her life was spent being cared for by the NHS and by a local children's hospice, and I'll be eternally grateful for everything they did to give us so much more time with her than we expected. At the time of her birth, we understood genetic conditions but didn't yet have the tools to help. The human genome was finally mapped just a year before she died, and that same year the first enzyme replacement therapy trials for her condition commenced in the UK. People born today with my sister's condition now have a range of treatment options to help make their lives more comfortable and more fulfilling. I'm particularly proud that Exeter University, in partnership with our local NHS Trust, is at the forefront of this new wave of innovation. We know that scientific research and innovation, whether it be in tackling climate change or in medical advances, will make the lives of people in this country and around the world better. But government has to recognise the vital role of our universities to economic growth and take advantage of the many opportunities for partnership with the NHS and across the public sector. I know this government will understand the need to ensure that the UK continues to be at the forefront of scientific endeavour, but as a pro-European, I believe this is where Britain can make a huge contribution, working with our European friends and partners despite the tragedy of Brexit. I also ask that ministers recognise that Exeter and the wider South West has the talent and the institutions in which to invest to ensure the UK remains at the cutting edge of UK and European innovation. To succeed in these endeavours, we also have to recognise that diversity is a strength, and so building communities together on the principles of equality for everyone is vital to our success. In Exeter, the university and the local council play an important roles in bringing people together. We have a thriving mosque and Muslim community, we have welcomed hundreds of Ukrainian and Hong Kong families over recent years, and we have large and growing Kurdish, Afghan and Nigerian communities, among others. Everyone brings something new and positive to our city. I love nothing more than our annual Respect Festival, a celebration of all of our many communities, and our Pride Parade. Inclusive Exeter CIC, run by the community, also plays an important role in bringing communities together. Exeter has become a true beacon of living well together. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's a privilege and an honour to represent all the people of Exeter in this place, and I thank them for their vote of confidence in sending me here. I'd like to thank my local activists as well, and of course my family and friends, some of whom are in the gallery today, for all their support over the years. Without them, I wouldn't be here. Exeter is a happy and optimistic place. I hope to do it proud by serving it as conscientiously and successfully as my distinguished predecessor. Thank you.
Lead Dillon to make his maiden speech.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you to the Honourable Member for Exeter, and congratulations on your maiden speech. My actual hometown of Thatcham was recorded in the Guinness Book of Records in 1990 as the oldest continuously inhabited settlement in the country, dating back some 3,000 years, but not quite a parliamentary seat. Can I also pay my respects and tributes to your sister? I referenced my own sister in my speech and her reliance on the NHS too. Madam Deputy Speaker, I've been in the Chamber for many maiden debates, and I've been impressed by all previous speakers, and I congratulate them all on sharing their passion and their local knowledge. Newbury, where I'm the Member of Parliament for, has returned a member since 1835. But since the recent boundary changes, the constituency has now lost the south bank of the Thames at Streatley and villages including Compton, West Ilsley, and pertinent to me, the village of my grandparents, Hampstead Norris. But I know that they are safe in the stewardship of the Honourable Member for Reading West and Mid Berkshire. But we have still retained our market towns of Newbury, Thatcham and Hungerford, alongside our beautiful villages of Lambourne, Peasmore, Inkpen, Hermitage, Cheveley and Coldash, where I went to primary school, to name but a few. We have a proud racing heritage in our constituency, with Lambourne training some of the best horse races in the world, and in Newbury you'll find one of the most prestigious horse races in the calendar. In Hungerford you can spend the afternoon antique shopping, and in Thatcham you can visit one of the largest inland reed beds in southern England, home to internationally important species. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, we are also home to Vodafone, one of the global leaders in telecommunications, Xtrac in Thatcham, supplying Formula One components, and Stryker, one of the world's leading medical technological companies. Away from the cutting-edge technology, we also have traditional craftsmanship on offer from companies like Benchmark in Kintbury, who have been building and designing furniture there for over 40 years, and delightful country homes like Welford Park, which was home to the Great British Bake Off, and one of the most unique and beautiful theatres in the country, the Watermill at Bagnor. And of course, we are supported by many great charities: Grahame Common Trust, the Community Furniture Project, 8 Bells for Mental Health, local almshouses, and sadly, West Berkshire Food Bank and Newbury Soup Kitchen, who are needed to help a growing number of local residents. We also enjoy our natural beauty of being surrounded by the ANOB and 200 of the most precious chalk streams in the country. Like all previous maiden speeches, we all like to claim the beauty of our own area, but I think the author Bill Bryson has it spot on and may be able to stop future disagreements in the chamber. In his book, The Road to Little Dribbling, he writes, "There isn't a landscape in the world that is more artfully worked, more lovely to behold, more comfortable to be in than the countryside of Great Britain. It is the world's largest park, its most perfect accidental garden." And he concludes by saying, all we have to do is look after it. Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, as a member of a political party with a proud heritage of standing up for the environment, I can assure honourable members and my constituents that I will do my bit whilst in this place to make sure that we do look after it. And the decision that I believe this debate will conclude with, given the cross-party support on all sides, will also contribute to that ideal, and I welcome the changes proposed. As the member for Newbury, I will uphold our traditions. I will protect our environment, because together, without those, the Newbury constituency would not be what it is: a balance between our environment, our traditions, and our ability to innovate. These were also supported by my predecessors. My immediate predecessor, who actually, strangely, I saw in Central Lobby just before coming in here, was Laura Farris, and she delivered meaningful change in this House on sexual abuse and women's violence. She secured new laws on sexual violence in the Domestic Abuse Act, and she campaigned for tougher sentences for fatal domestic abuse. It's a further credit, Madam Deputy Speaker, to Laura that the handover to me was as smooth as one could have hoped. I wish Laura and her family all the best for the future, and I'm sure she will continue to make a difference. I also want to briefly praise my two other predecessors from the constituency of Newbury. Richard, now Lord Benyon, who served Newbury from 2005 to 2019 and has always been open and approachable to me and offered me some early advice when I was first elected. And the Liberal Democrat MP, David Rendell, who held the seat following a then record-breaking by-election, we're rather good at those on this side, from 93 to 2005, and who I ran with in my home ward back in 2007, starting my electoral journey in West Berkshire. All three of those predecessors cared deeply about Newbury and West Berkshire, as I do too. But in new times, there are new challenges. The Royal Berkshire Hospital in Reading is in great need of replacement, and I look forward to a swift review of the new hospital programme. The West Berkshire Community Hospital in Newbury can and is willing to do more, so that diagnostic services can be provided locally. Without the NHS Madam Deputy Speaker, my sister Michelle would not be here today. We need to cherish it, fund it and modernise it. Now, despite our apparent wealth, in Newbury we have pockets of poverty. I alluded earlier that we are seeing an increase in food banks and soup kitchens. The cost of living is still hurting, and the proposed removal of the winter fuel allowance will compound that problem even more, despite our best efforts to get those who are entitled onto pension credits. House prices have soared, now over 10 times the average salary, increasing demand for rented houses, for rented homes, and adding pressure on housing waiting lists. The ability to have a warm and secure home is the foundation of a settled life. Children learn better, crime is lower, and community cohesion is stronger when you have a settled community. The last 14 years I have worked in social housing. We must do more to deliver much-needed homes at social rent. Now, I wish to conclude my speech, Madam Deputy Speaker, by giving a small round of thanks. First, to my constituents for entrusting me with the honour of representing us here, and to my local team for engaging in so many positive conversations on the doors. I will endeavour to pay back their support of me with my deeds in this House. To my wife, Gemma, and my children, Oliver, James and Eleanor, I say thank you for your constant support and love that has allowed me to fulfil my dream of being the Member of Parliament for my home. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, as a 16-year-old, I arranged a visit to Parliament, and as we were shown around the chamber, we were just coming past the opposition benches, and a school friend cheekily sat down as he went past. Now, I'm not going to use parliamentary privilege to name him, but he encouraged me to do the same, which you'll be pleased to hear I declined. However, I did say that I will sit on the benches if I ever get elected. Well, 25 years later, I can now rightly take my place on these famous green benches, so some dreams do come true. As the son of a trade union official, I suspect I was always going to end up in a role where I could speak truth to power. So I want to say a thank you to my father Raymond for instilling a sense of fairness in me and the belief that you can make change happen. And to my mother, Geraldine, and stepfather Colin, you have supported every election that I have stood in. Thank you for being there for me, for keeping me honest, and reminding me that it is nice to be important, but it is more important to be nice. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
James McMurdock to make his maiden speech.
Madam Deputy Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to address this House, and thank you to the honourable members who have spoken already today, whether falling foul of a wasp, speaking of working what levers to pull, which I can certainly empathise with, or sharing genuine courage, which I think we all would agree is absolutely necessary in this House. Thank you all for your words. I'd like to start by thanking my predecessor, Stephen Metcalfe. I extend to him my gratitude, not least for his gentlemanly conduct throughout his campaign. He was both gracious and dignified throughout. It is easy to therefore understand why he was, as far as a politician might reasonably expect, well liked by both MPs and constituents. As we navigate life's milestones, it's natural to become philosophical. First and foremost, I am a husband and a father, and while no professional achievement rivals the significance of personal events like childbirth, being given the tremendous opportunity to serve our country and constituents, those in need, and perhaps if we do our jobs right, those we can help avoid need altogether, does come close. Speaking of fatherhood and childbirth, I would like to draw everyone's attention to the tremendous work done by the Basildon University Hospital, a place where miracles are commonplace, the place where my children were born, the place that has nursed virtually everyone I love back to health at one time or another. To everyone who works there, I extend my heartfelt appreciation, admiration, and respect. South Basildon and East Thurrock, since its inception, as a constituency, had always voted blue, until they chose turquoise for the first time this July. To stand here today, I had to overcome a previous winning margin of 19,922. My own winning margin was less dominant and was one of the tightest in the country with just 98 votes. A swing this large is strong testament to the importance of listening to the people who put us here. All of them. A lesson I will not forget. It goes without saying that I alone did not achieve that swing. While I would like to think my efforts, and particularly those of my mother, who marched tirelessly next to me, handing out flyers in the baking June sun, may have earned me the 100 or so votes that got me over the line, the vast majority of that shift was carried by my colleagues and fellow MPs within Reform UK. Their tireless championing of the British people is something we should strive to emulate. I am extremely grateful to them, and as Nigel quite rightly said, this has ruined my life, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I will be eternally grateful to the good people of South Basildon and East Thurrock for sending me here. I intend to repay their trust by being open and honest, accessible and available. Never has it been more important to reconfirm that they have the right to a voice, and it is my duty to hear it and protect their right to it. Having only volunteered to stand as a parliamentary candidate on the 4th of May, and having only been invited to stand on the 4th of June, it is therefore poetic that my seat was one of the last to be called in England, having to endure 3 counts. I might add, I won all 3. South Basildon and East Thurrock is a beautiful cross-section of this country. Situated just 30 miles east along the Thames from this beautiful palace, it is an area of great natural diversity, joyfully combining the new with a rich and varied history, both rural and industrial. South Basildon and East Thurrock can boast Europe's largest Amazon centre and at the same time glorious countryside and a prime location on the Thames. Many of our quaint villages have historic significance, with Horndon on the Hill, mentioned in the Domesday Book of 1086, and Fobbing, a village where one of the earliest uprisings that led to the Peasants' Revolt took place in 1381. Those uprisings marked the beginning of the end of serfdom. I am hopeful that the lessons taught to the ruling class then never need to be relearned. How appropriate it is then that I have the privilege to stand and champion the core values that so many from my home hold dear: independence, equality of opportunity, upward social mobility, courage, long-suffering, honesty, and forgiveness. I am grateful to champion these qualities not just because I believe in them, but because I have benefited from them. I was the first in my family to go to university. I have been shown forgiveness, given opportunity, climbed upwards, and as the door was opened for me, I will help hold it open for others. Now, perhaps most importantly, thank you to the wonderful women in my life. My late grandmother, a survivor of the Blitz who dedicated her life to her family. My mother and sisters, whose strength, courage, and determination inspires me. And I've not written this, but I better mention my mother-in-law.
Very well.
To my wife, the mother of my children, who in a crowd of powerful women stands as the most glorious of all. You are my strength, my light, and I love you with all my heart.
Well done.
To my father, brother, to my late grandfather, who fought for this land and spent his last years in peace in the constituency I now represent, and to the rest of my big, wonderful, eclectic family, thank you for mocking me so ruthlessly, my feet will never leave the ground. And now, if you'll all forgive me, to fulfil a dream nearly a quarter of a century in the making, I end by misquoting the immortal words of Ali G. R-E-S-P-E-C-T. God save the King.
I call Minister Mike Kane.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My goodness, it's a pleasure to see you in the chair as well. Congratulations on your election. It's been a very collegiate debate, and I am grateful to all members who've attended tonight, and I am grateful for the opposition for their support in this matter. I have to say to the member for Mid Buckinghamshire, though, I'm looking forward to the picture on his social media of his Saft Power Land Rover as he goes canvassing in his constituency. I think that is a must-see for us all. It's on its way, that he says, from a sedentary position. That's good news. And yes, there has been quite good cross-party support. When I was in opposition, I supported the government In this, the member for Witney made his maiden speech just earlier. He's not in his place now, but I just want to put on record my tribute to the former member for Witney who held this post where I stand today and did it with diligence and care and good humour. And I wish him well for the best for the future. This legislation was really set out under the last Labour government in 2003. With the Aviation White Paper, The Future of Air Transport, where we talked about the future of decarbonising aviation for the first time and bringing in new sustainable fuels. And I'm glad we're carrying that. But he did have some specific questions. Now, he did ask about ticket prices, I think. So government recognises that SAF will be more expensive than traditional jet fuel. And it's right that the costs, as we've agreed in the past, are borne by the polluters. These are not going to be borne by government. And I think the figures are that by 2030 we expect tickets will be £4 more, which will be a 2% increase. And the figures I also have is that by 2040 they will be £10 more, which will be a 5.5% increase. And I have to say, before Mayor Burnham in Greater Manchester re-regulated the buses recently, one could fly from Manchester Airport to Dublin for £12.99, but you couldn't cross my conurbation on a bus and change transport providers for that amount of money. So he's right to raise it, the opposition minister, but it is going to be negligible. He asked about the future fuel funds. Well, we see in private industry some great things going on in the northwest of England. We see Fulcrum producing sustainable aviation fuel at Ellesmere Port. We see Velios in the northeast, and I'll come to the member for Easington in a minute, doing it at Immingham, and we see Alpha Air doing it in Teesside. So this is really good for parts of the north of England in terms of regeneration in post-industrial areas. He talked about power to liquids. Yes, that is the future, and in my speech I made some ambitious targets that we are going to have to meet to reduce the heifer and improve power to liquids. And he asked about our ambition. Now, we do not want in the UK to be at a competitive disadvantage. This is why we've carefully balanced the heifer cap in a way that recognises that heifer is the only currently commercially available type of SAF. But it doesn't mean we can't go further and faster. I think I mentioned in my speech that there will be reviews every 5 years, starting in 2030. So I hope that satisfies the opposition across, but I am grateful for their support in this area. Now, turning to the member of Easington, firstly, I always like to thank him for his contribution to transport debates. He's always in them. He's a stalwart when it comes to transport issues, and he's really considered. And he's right, there are too many anagrams in sustainable aviation fuel. Government opposite, when it was government opposite, they always talked about the bonfire of the regulations. Maybe we should start the bonfire of the anagrams. Would be the member's not wrong. We'll have to see. But he did raise that these are good, sustainable industrial jobs in parts of the country where we need good sustainable industrial jobs, and that's what SAF brings us, and that's what government is trying to achieve. The member. The opposition Liberal Democrats support. Can I thank you also for your support on this? We are working with suppliers. I've had round tables with suppliers, particularly in opposition, more to come in government. I've mentioned some of the companies that we were working with, and I think it is an ambition. Like I said, we can go further and faster. It isn't set in stone, those figures that I have set out today. And we should be promoting new technologies, because there's new technologies beyond this. There's hydrogen battery. Let's get to a point where we say that within UK emissions, wouldn't it be a great day for the Minister to say that there'll be no carbon burnt in any planes flying internally within the UK? That would be a great place to be. And I have to say, as a North of England elected member, this idea that you stop people from flying because there's a train It's fine when you live in an area where there are great reliable train services, but I'd invite the Honourable Member to come on my Avanti occasionally and see how unreliable and how poor that they are. So I think we have to, keep in mind that once we improve the rail services through our Great British Rail Bill, that one day in the future, but at the moment, absolutely no plans to do that as a government. The member for Exeter, I will give way to...
I'd just like to say, I think from these benches, how welcome the news that the government isn't going to pursue some form of new attack on short-haul planes is, and how glad that we are to see that he's ignoring the Liberal Democrats on this particular issue.
And thank you for the intervention, but I'm grateful for Small Mercies. They are supporting this. And while the former minister is on his feet, can I thank him for his time in this department and this role as well. For the member for Exeter, seriously, very well done. What an excellent and considered maiden speech. The personal testimony about your mother and your sister was really poignant, and that speech will stand you in good stead. I was, however, a little bit perturbed about the ex-member for Exeter, who I knew was a passionate advocate of aviation and sustainable aviation in this place, that when he canvasses, he whistles The Great Escape. Really, there isn't a day probably goes by when one of us actually whistles The Great Escape in this place. I was once taught by a sage old wit that most MPs spend their whole life trying to get here and then the rest of the week trying to get away. But I want to say to the member for Exeter, that was a really great, well-considered maiden speech, and I wish you all the very best for your years ahead on these benches. That was followed likewise by the member for Newbury with another very well considered maiden speech. I don't think anyone can beat the fact that you've got the home of Great British Bake Off in your constituency. No member could possibly beat that. I mean, that's amazing. But whether it comes to our beautiful chalk streams like the ones in Newbury or to our skies, it's our sacred mission to protect our environment for future generations, and that's why we have to keep talking about decarbonisation, and that's what we're doing here tonight. But very well done to the member of Newbury, and I wish him well on the benches going forward. And then finally to the member for South Basildon and East Thurrock. I too pay tribute to his predecessor. My first speech in a bill committee up in a dusty corridor, it was terrible. And he wrote me a note saying, "Really well done, Mike," he said. And I've still got the note on my wall today. What a lovely, lovely man. But congratulations to the member there. And he raised childbirth and early maternal care. And I think that's probably a subject we should come back to a lot more in this House in the future. I think there's still a lot more to do. And as a latter-day Wat Tyler, with the Peasants' Revolt quote, I hope there isn't a great rising of reform on a personal level, but I do wish the honourable member and his career in this place the best for the future as well. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I would like to thank members again for their consideration. For those questions where it has not been possible to provide a response today, please let me know and I will write to you. SAF does present a key opportunity to decarbonise UK aviation and secure a long-term future for the sector. These proposed regulations demonstrate how we can capitalise on this opportunity. Mandating the use of SAF has the potential to generate significant greenhouse gas savings and ultimately play a pivotal role in achieving net zero. I commend this order to the House.
The question is, as on the order paper, as many as are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. I'll now give the front benches time to change over.